the next 24 hours were very crazy. I had to be, I lost consciousness about 20 minutes later. I had to be taken on a stretcher in the ambulance to the local hospital, lost the ability to breathe on my own, eventually was air cared to a larger facility, had 3 seizures over the next 24 hours, had to be intubated, placed into a medically induced coma.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Todd Durkin Impact Show, where it's all about impacting others so you could be the best version of yourself everywhere you are around the globe today. And I am so honored and pleased to have James Clear, author of the international best-selling book, Atomic Habits, in the house. James, how are you today?
Hey, doing great. Nice to talk to you.
Man, it's so great to have you. Where are you calling in from?
Columbus, Ohio.
So James is in Columbus, Ohio. Now check this out, folks. I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits or not, but if there's ever a time to read it, it's now. Atomic Habits, over 1 million copies sold worldwide, 15 consecutive months on the New York Times bestseller list, 40 plus language it's been translated into. James has over 650,000 email subscribers, so make sure you're one of them. If you're not, go to jamesclear.com and check it out. And over 10 million visitors per year to jamesclear.com. So he's a speaker at major companies, you name it: Cisco, GE, Honda, Intel, LinkedIn, McKinsey & Company, Merrill Lynch, and a ton of others. And check this out. And I want to talk about this, James, today. In college, Denison, he was an ESPN academic All-American as a baseball pitcher, and he's an avid weightlifter. At 501-pound deadlift, 425-pound squat, 305 in the bench, and 315 in the clean. James, I want to talk about that. That is an awesome intro. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, good to talk to you. Yeah, thanks, man. I don't know. My dad played professional baseball. He played in the minor leagues for the St. Louis Cardinals, and so sports were a big part of my life growing up. And then after I was done playing in college, you have this kind of loss of identity where you're like, man, my whole life I've been an athlete and now I'm not anymore. So, so what am I now? And weightlifting kind of filled that void for me. So I just got excited about it and wanted a different reason to train. And it's been a lot of fun. So I've been doing that for the last decade or so.
How much are you lifting these days amongst the, the quarantine and everything we're in right now? Are you using like weight training and exercise as part of your habits right now?
Yeah. I definitely am trying to do something every day. It's a very strange time, like we're in lockdown. We're in like week 3 or 4 of it now. And so it's just, I'm like trying to move as much for sanity as for anything else right now.
Amen.
So my wife and I have started this daily walking habit, which doesn't sound like much, but man, it just feels so good to get outside of the 4 walls and get into some sunshine and move around a little bit. So that's been helpful. Doing more body weight stuff now than I was before. We have a little bit at home, but like not as much of a full gym setup as I would want. So we've been having to work around that. I was just right before this call, I was looking up sprint shoes. We have a track like 2 blocks away from us. So I'm like, well, maybe I should just start doing more sprint work, and that can take the place of some of the other explosive stuff.
Wait a second. So you have a track. Is that at like a high school or college?
Yeah, it's a high school in our neighborhood.
And they keep it open?
Yeah, they're really great about it. We live in an awesome little neighborhood, and you can very walkable, and they let everybody use the.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. I think all schools right now should open up their tracks and just across the country, mandatory open the tracks, because all the schools are on lockdown. There's no kids there. You might as well open up the communities, open up the tracks and say, hey, communities, get moving. Because out here in San Diego, the tracks, the schools, everything's locked down. I think that'd be a great way. Keep your social distancing. I call it physical distancing, 6 feet apart, and get a great, workout on the bleachers and the track. There's not much of a better workout than that.
Yeah, I think being outside is actually quite healthy, provided, like you said, provided that you keep enough distance. Golf courses, tracks, hiking in the woods, whatever. Like getting out is probably good for everybody if you can maintain space.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to talk a lot about your habits and atomic habits today. But before we do so, in your book, Atomic Habits, I read it a long time ago. It's a great book. Obviously, millions of people have read the book. You talk about the story when you were younger growing up. You weren't much of an athlete. And, I'm reading, ESPN academic All-American in college and all. But talk more about how did you get into, creating atomic habits? Because when you were younger, you weren't a standout athlete.
Yeah, I would say really my athletic career kind of peaked at the end. I was an academic All-American my final season that I played my senior year in college. So I was definitely kind of a late bloomer. I mean, some of that was a little bit my body and makeup. Like my freshman year when I got to college, I was 6'4", 170. So I was basically just a stick. So it just took me much longer to put weight on. When I finally bulked up, I was, so when I went in, I was 6'4", 170. 6 years later, I was 6'4", 230. This was kind of like once I was getting into the weightlifting stuff more seriously. And, I always said, like, yeah, if I had that body when I was 18, that basically is what a lot of these guys who are going to big time programs, they're like a 25-year-old when they're 17 years old.
Hey, James, was there a coach who got you into that 170 to 230? That's a massive shift. What was?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was over 6 years, so it was gradual.
Okay. All right.
I think it took me 4 years to go from 170 to like 195, 200-ish, and then 2 years to add that last 30 pounds. And that was after my baseball career ended, and I just started training in the gym like 4 days a week.
Got it. Keep going. Yep.
But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I played a lot of sports growing up: baseball, basketball, swimming, football. Football, I only played for 1 year. In football, there are guys who are giving hits, and there are guys who are getting hit, and I was always getting hit. But anyway, so sports played a big part of my life. And then my sophomore year of high school, I suffered a real serious injury where I was hit in the face with a baseball bat. And it was an accident. A classmate of mine took a swing, bat slipped out of his hands, and sort of rotated helicopter style through the air and struck me right between the eyes. Broke my nose, broke the bone behind my nose, which is your ethmoid bone, which is like fairly deep inside your skull. Shattered both eye sockets.
Yep.
You know, the next 24 hours were very crazy. I had to be, I lost consciousness about 20 minutes later. I had to be taken on a stretcher in an ambulance to the local hospital, lost the ability to breathe on my own, eventually was air cared to a larger facility, had 3 seizures over the next 24 hours, had to be intubated, placed into a medically induced coma. Thankfully, the next day, my vitals had stabilized and I was released from the coma and woke back up, and kind of this process of healing began. And that was really the first time, of course, like all humans, I was building habits all throughout my life, but I wasn't really thinking about it. But that time, after the injury, those next 9 months, I mean, my physical therapy session, I was practicing basic motor patterns, like walking in a straight line. Couldn't drive a car for 9 months. So it was the first time in my life when I was forced to start small and to think about building these little habits and behaviors. And so the process of recovering from that injury, even though the behaviors that I would tell you about, like going to bed at the same hour each night, or training in the gym for a couple days a week for the first time in my life, or prepping for class for an hour each day, like all those things sound pretty minor, but they gave me a sense of control over my life again after I lost that. And so that was the first period in my life where I kind of came into what habits were and how they formed and kind of building them as a practitioner. And then it wasn't until 5 or 6 or 7 years later that I started researching about how habits form and writing about it. So I kind of came into it through the practice first, and then the theory and the science later.
Yeah. You do a great job in the book in the beginning talking about that story, and really captivated me because I'm always fascinated at how sometimes our lowest moments in our life turn out to be the biggest transition points, pivot points of like, here this was. Little did you think when you're in a coma or in your rehab that this would be the impetus of you writing a book called Atomic Habits that would go on to be a 15-time consecutive month on the New York Times bestseller list when you're lying in a gurney of this. But I believe part of your story is exactly that. And folks, as you're listening in today, in what may be some of the most challenging times in your life or in our nation or world history, have you thought about maybe, just maybe, this could be the pivot that could be the turnaround for your life? And
yeah,
James,
I think there's a lot of lessons that connect and resonate with strength training in the sense that in order for your body to grow, you have to be placed under a stimulus, right? You need the stress in order to instigate or initiate the growth. And this example, this little story of mine, I don't think there's anything necessarily legendary or heroic about my story. Like, we all have challenges that we face, But those challenges that come into our lives, they are stimulus. They are a stressor, a chance for us to grow in response. And, of course, as you mentioned right now, it's a very strange, uncertain, stressful time. And there are, obviously terrible things that are going to be a result of this. People getting sick, people dying. But if you're fortunate enough to make it through, I think it is true that we can reframe it a little bit and use it as a chance to grow, to see it as a stimulus to respond to, a chance to increase not only maybe your physical wellness, but also your emotional well-being, to upgrade your ability to take ownership or responsibility of your life, to improve the odds that you develop a mentally tough mindset. Those are all, it's a stressor. It's a stimulus that you can respond to the same way that your body can respond to a set in the gym.
I think you never see it when you're going through it, but when you look back in 6 months or a year, you're gonna be like, hey, April 2020, May 2020, it was that moment when I started sitting down and writing my memoirs or writing that book or creating that game-changing product or program. It was because now I took advantage of that. So upon reflection, that is often the turning point. And I want to talk about that now, James, because I think we talk about habits right now. They're absolutely crucial for all of us. And I've been preaching on great habits for my entire career as well. But when you look at habits, there's a lot of us that have developed some tough habits right now between eating, sugar, stress, and everything else. What are some things that you would recommend now, habit-wise, taking the same principles that you share in Atomic Habits? What are some of those principles that we could apply now to create some really positive habits to elicit good emotions right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So broadly speaking, there are, and the book goes into all this in much more detail, but there are about 4 things that you want to happen if you want a good habit to stick. So the first thing is you want your good habits to be obvious. You want to be available, visible, easy to see. The more easy it is for you to see the right thing to do, the more likely it is that you get started on it. The second thing is that you want it to be attractive. The more attractive or appealing a habit is, the more likely you are to feel motivated to do it. The third thing is you want it to be easy. The easier, more convenient, frictionless, simple a habit is, the more likely you are to follow through and take action. And then the fourth thing that you want is you want it to be satisfying. The more satisfying or enjoyable it is, as you just mentioned, elicit a positive emotion, right? To have some kind of pleasure or joy associated with the behavior, the more likely you are to follow through. So those 4 things: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. That's what I refer to as the 4 laws of behavior change. And there are a bunch of ways to apply those concepts. And you don't always need all 4, but the more that you have those working in your favor, the more likely it is that you'll stick with the behavior. So as an example, let's take the first law, make it obvious. Well, anytime the environment changes in a big way, behavior changes in a big way. And that's partially because new things become obvious to you. So like if you're working from home right now and you don't normally do that, well, maybe now your kitchen table is your office. It's your desk. Well, if that's the case, then the pantry might be just like 6 feet away, right? And all of a sudden, it's very obvious to snack. It's easy to walk over there. So the question I think to ask yourself is, how can I prime the environment? How can I design the space I'm working or living in so that the good actions are the obvious and easy ones, and the bad actions have like more steps between me and them? So let me give you a couple practical examples. So one of the things I'm trying to do a little more of now that we're stuck at home is to use that extra time to read and build a little bit more of a reading habit. So right now I'm at my desk. I got a stack of like 5 or 6 books right next to me here. All right. So and then I have a couple by my bed in the bedroom. Then I've got a few on the living room table. So I'm kind of sprinkling books around the environment to make it a little more obvious. Second thing that I did is I took my phone and I moved Audible to the home screen. So the first thing that I saw when I opened my phone up is a reminder to listen to an audiobook or to read.
Nice.
And then the third thing that I did is I usually, when I'm on my computer, I'm in the browser, and most of the time I've got 10 or 15 tabs open. And like 2 or 3 of those are related to work. It's like Gmail or Asana or something like that. Then the other 10, they're usually things that I'm either in the middle of reading or I want to read soon. And so my point is, between my phone, my desk, and the tabs on the screen, I'm surrounded by stuff that I need to read or that I want to read. And so whenever I get distracted, it's easier for me to get into something productive and use that next moment in a useful way rather than to just waste it doing something mindless. Right. So That's all an example of that kind of first law: make it obvious and make it easy as well.
Before you move on, I actually feel relieved that you actually have 10 to 15 tabs open as well. I thought I was the only crazy one.
I'm definitely, I always got those fired up. But
y'all are laughing out there. Listen, I know you are, because you're walking right now, you're working now. You're like, oh, okay, I'm not as insane as I thought I was. And the reading part, I love, because I've got a bunch of books going too. And James, I'm going to send you my new book coming out in June. It's called Get Your Mind Right. So to add one of your repertoire. I've got yours.
nice. That's great.
Habits. But what I would say is this: if you have your home desk or your home office in the kitchen table right now, has anyone else out there right now, like, the pantry is talking to you? Like, the food actually talks, like, especially the sugar. If you got sugar, it's actually saying, come here, Todd. Hey, James, come here. I taste really good. And you've got this relationship going on, this dance going on. So I love when you talk about the environment, priming the environment for success. That's powerful. I love it.
Yeah, so that's an example of the first law, that make it obvious idea.
Make it obvious. Yeah.
Another one that I mentioned is this idea of making it satisfying, finding a little bit of joy in the process. And this is crucial if you want any habit to stick, because if you don't have a positive emotion associated with the habit, that's kind of the signal to your brain that says, hey, that felt good, you should do this again next time. And if it has a consequence, or you didn't really enjoy it, or even if it's just kind of neutral, your brain is sort of like, why would I repeat that? Like, it wasn't that enjoyable. So for this one, I think one of the things that you can do is to choose the form of that habit that is most likely to bring you joy. So as an example with exercise, not everybody has to train like a bodybuilder. Not everybody needs to do strength training. Maybe you love going for hikes or kayaking or canoeing or, rock climbing or whatever, cycling. Like, there's almost an infinite number of things that you could do to get physical activity in. So choose the version that is going to bring you the most joy, so that you can, more likely establish that habit. So same thing is true for reading. Like, you don't have to just read nonfiction, because that's what I like to read. Like, if you like to read fantasy novels or romance books or whatever, like, that's fine. Just fall in love with the habit of reading. And then once you fall in love with it, then you can expand out and throw a new book in there every now and then, or try something different or whatever. And same thing with exercise.
Why do you feel it's important to read?
So I consider there's sort of a class of habits that I think we could call like meta habits. And I consider reading to be a meta habit. And what I mean is, there are habits that make it easier for you to do all these other things. So sleep is another good example. If you get a good night's sleep, if you build good sleep habits, then all of a sudden it's easier for you to do all these other habits the next day. It's easier for you to work out. It's easier to think clearly. It's easier to be more productive, etc. Reading is the same way, in the sense that reading is kind of upstream from all these other things that you want to achieve. Like, almost anything that you want to achieve, you can read a book on how to do it. Want to learn how to launch a podcast? Great. We got books on that. Want to learn how to be a better cook? Good. We have tons of cooking books. Want to learn how to lift weights? Like, you can read about that. It literally, like, almost anything. Want to build your own house? Great. We got books on it. So if you can fall in love with reading, whatever problem you happen to be facing at that point in your life, you can just open up a book and help resolve it. And so in that sense, I think reading is kind of a meta habit that unlocks a lot of the other things that you want out of life.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, no, I once heard that there's a stat. It's like, after high school, the average person only reads like one book, or some crazy stat like that. And I'm like, when I read, it stimulates the brain, it stimulates the mind. And I think we talk about routine and habit. One of the best things that one could do even before bed, you talk about great sleep, is turn off the television. And that's input that's not going to feed your brain good inspirational material. Or talk about books like on habits. Read something that you enjoy, and that's going to allow you to sleep better, so you can recover, rejuvenate, re-energize, so you wake up and feel good. So I think from a brain standpoint, from, like, I was talking about, get your mind right, this gets your brain right. So find what you love to do and read. I think that's awesome, James.
Yeah. I think I tend to prefer books because they are more heavily edited. But of course, you can learn from other places. Podcasts are a good example. YouTube videos, if you choose the right ones.
Sure.
So it's really about being a lifelong learner. The books have the benefit of being revised heavily, whereas, like, we're not going to have, like, this podcast conversation 12 times, for example, and then try to improve it each time. Whereas an author or an editor, they will read the chapter 12 times and, like, revise it and tighten it up. So there's a little bit of benefit there with the iteration, but I think you can get it from a lot of sources. So anyway, so those two, make it obvious and make it satisfying. Those are really important. But if you're looking for one place, if you're like, James, what is the one thing I should start with? I would recommend that third law, making it easy. And specifically, the strategy that I would recommend, no matter what habit you're trying to build, if you're just trying to figure out where to start, use what I call the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule says you take whatever habit you're trying to build and you scale it down to something that takes 2 minutes or less to do. So, read 30 books a year becomes read 1 page. Do yoga 4 days a week becomes take out my yoga mat. And sometimes people resist that a little bit because they're like, okay, I know I'm not just trying to like take my yoga mat out, or I know I'm not just trying to do like 1 set of squats. Like I know I'm actually trying to, do the workout or whatever. So this is some kind of like mental trick. Like, why would I fall for it, basically? And I get where people are coming from, but I got the story. This guy named Mitch, I mentioned him in Atomic Habits. He ended up losing over 100 pounds. And for the first 6 weeks that he went to the gym, he had a rule for himself where he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So he'd get in the car, drive to the gym, get out, do half an exercise, get back in the car, drive home. And it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds silly. You're like, this is not going to get the guy the results that he wants. But if you back up, what you realize is that he was mastering the art of showing up, right? He was becoming the type of person that went to the gym 4 days a week, even if it was only for 5 minutes. And I think there's a deep truth about habits buried in there, which is a habit must be established before it can be improved, right? Like it has to become the standard in your life before you can optimize it or scale it up into anything. And for whatever reason, we're so focused on perfection a lot of the time. Like we're so focused on finding the perfect workout plan, the best business idea, the ideal diet to follow. We're so focused on optimizing that we don't give ourselves permission to show up, even if it's just in a small way. But, I love that quote by Ed Lattimore where he says, the heaviest weight of the gym is the front door. And like, that's the whole idea is like, you got to master the art of showing up. You can't become the type of person that opens the front door 4 days a week. Then you have no hope to be the person who does this wonderful, like 45-minute workout that you have theorized as the best possible, exercise or whatever. So I think a focus on practice rather than theory in the beginning to get it established, and then you can scale up and optimize from there. And I think the 2-minute rule helps you do that.
I love that. I love the idea of just showing up, right? Showing up every day and showing up when you don't feel like it. I would say the best workouts are the workouts that you don't feel like doing, but you do anyway. It's when you don't feel like practicing a sport or music or theater, whatever it is. It's like you got to show up. You have to have the discipline, the uber maniacal focus and discipline to show up when you don't feel like it, because that's what the best in the world do is show up. And that's a great story. I like that. Mastering the art of showing up. That's a good one, James.
You may have felt this too. My wife and I trained together, and we've been talking about this more over the last year, that it's kind of this weird thing that happens where when we don't feel like going, well, first of all, it's very helpful to train with somebody because when I don't feel like going, she does. And when she doesn't, I do. And so we kind of end up dragging each other in there. But almost always, if we show up and it's just like, man, I do not have it today. Like I just feel spent, or like I just like the weight is not moving. You get through that workout, and then like almost inevitably, like 4 days later or something, you're in the gym again, sometime the next week or 2 or 3 workouts later or whatever. And you've got a great workout, and you almost know that the reason you had a good time that day is because you didn't miss like last week. Right. It's like if you only went to the gym on days where you're like, I feel great, I could hit a PR, you would never hit PRs because you'd only be in there like 4 days a month. But when you go, even though you don't feel like it, it's like you're building up the capacity to have this peak performance a couple of days later.
Yeah. And I think right now, as our listeners listen to today's episode, it is imperative that we move most days of the week. I'm trying to do something every day and getting out and enjoying some fresh air myself every day. I've got my wife, Melanie, same exact thing, because there's a chemical response that happens in the brain and in the body. It's called DOSE, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins that are released from the movement our bodies so desperately need right now. So the output versus input, when you actually go out and you exert yourself physically, there's a chemical response, physical response that happens that allows you the brain to focus, to feel clear, to feel better, and emotionally you are going to get your mind right and get your heart right and everything else. So I just want to reemphasize for anyone listening today, and James is doing an amazing job reinforcing this, is you got to show up every day. And showing up is when, right now, man, if you've been eating like dog dirt, you don't feel like doing it. It's like, get up, get vertical, get your sneakers on. And if, hey, I was gonna say, if it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes, if it's 2 minutes, get out there and move the body. So James, what are some of your best habits? Like, if we look at, I always love looking at best habits of high performers. You're obviously a high performer. You look at even your morning routine, your evening routine. What are some of James Clear's best habits?
Yeah. Interesting question. Probably I can think of 3 or 4 that I feel like really play a big role in my overall output. So I kind of have this cardinal rule where I don't cheat myself on sleep. So that helps a lot. If I usually get 8 hours a night. If I'm really training heavy or I'm like totally wiped, then maybe it'll be more like 9 or something, but it's usually around that 8-hour mark. And that helps a lot. So that's a big one, sleep. Second one that plays more of a role in my business rather than like personal health is writing. Now, I happen to write publicly, right? I'm an author. I write on a blog, whatever. But I don't think that you have to share it publicly to get the benefit of it. The real benefit is, and this kind of pairs directly with another one I was going to mention we've already talked about, which is reading. So they kind of go hand in hand. I view it sort of like driving a car. So like going to the gas station and filling the tank up with gas, that's like reading. You're like putting stuff in. And then going on an adventure and driving around town, that's writing. And you're kind of getting somewhere. You're getting something out of it. And you sort of need both. And if I feel too spent because I've been writing too much, or I feel like I don't have any good ideas, I usually need to go back to the pump and fill up again and read more. But I also don't think the point of reading is just to like sit at the gas station all day long and just put gas in the car. Like that's not the point of having a car. You're supposed to go somewhere. And I think writing helps you do that. It helps you accomplish the clarity of thought. It's basically about figuring out what you actually think about something.
How much do you think you read a day? Is it pages? Like, you have a goal of, I want to read 10 pages a day, 20, 50, or is it more time?
I used to do it, and I've done it both ways. I used to be strict, not strict about it, but I used to care a lot about measuring it, about what my actual output was. Now it's just kind of become a way of life. And so I don't even really pay attention to it anymore. I'm not tracking how many pages I get through or how many hours I spend reading.
Okay.
Part of that is a luxury for me versus maybe someone who that isn't their job, right? Like I'm always reading because that is the work to me, is like to read and then to write and compress it and write something else and, turn into an article and so on. So, if my job was something totally unrelated to that, then maybe it would be helpful for me to have a measuring stick to kind of drive me forward to make sure I was doing it. But now it's just a way of life.
How about the writing part? You have, and I've studied a lot of famous authors. Do you have a system that you use writing wise? Like, I want to write 2,500 words a day, or I want to write for X period, or does it come in spurts based if you're working on it? I mean, obviously you write all the time, but do you have a rule or a habit for yourself on that?
So that was a huge thing that probably, I would say that my writing habit led to the reason that we're talking right now is because of the writing habit that I followed for 3 years. It led to the growth of the business. It led to the launch of the book. So for the first 3 years that I wrote at jamesclear.com, I published a new article every Monday and Thursday. And I think I think one time I was sick. I had food poisoning and I wrote like 2 sentences and I said, the article's coming soon, and posted that. But I think other than that, I don't think I missed for those first 3 years. And the consistency of that habit led to all the other great things that now have been downstream from that, writing Atomic Habits, having a career around writing, et cetera. And so in the early days, I feel like that was really important. And I also would say that, so let's define writing a book as intensity, which you could also say like running a marathon, intensity, or trying to max out your back squat, intensity, versus writing 2 blog posts a week for 3 years. That's like consistency rather than intensity, or like going on a run 4 days a week rather than running a marathon, consistency versus intensity. I think most people need consistency more than they need intensity. They need to sit and breathe deeply for 15 minutes a day rather than to do a week-long silent meditation retreat. They need that consistency more than they need this intense output. But running a marathon or doing a silent meditation retreat or publishing a book or hitting a PR, those are very sexy things to talk about. And so I think they pull us in more. But especially early on, I think it's more important to have that consistency, develop your, it's also, you could also define it as volume before intensity. You need to build up the capacity to do the work. Yeah. And so I needed that period to develop my taste, develop my skill as a writer, figure out what I wanted to write about. And then once I had that for 3 years, then I was like, okay, now I'm in a better position to take on this intense task of writing a book. Yeah. So my writing habit is different now because I'm writing books rather than blog posts. So it's, it's changed a little bit. And I do still publish articles on the site, but just not at the same rate because I'm working on book chapters and whatnot. Yeah. But I really do believe that having that period of consistency before the intensity was like important in my overall growth.
James, what would you say if someone is thinking right now, well, I'm not a writer. I don't like to write. Do you think it's still important for that person to write?
Yeah, fantastic question. So first of all, you should do whatever works for you. So, just because some people get results one way doesn't mean that you should do what they're, recommending. So I don't necessarily think everybody in the world should be following the same exact habits. That said, your question about, well, I don't really consider myself a writer. I think there's actually a very deep and interesting lesson to learn out of that, and this is one of the core ideas in Atomic Habits, is that your habits are how you embody a particular identity. So for example, every morning that you make your bed, you embody the identity of someone who's clean and organized. Every time you do one push-up, you embody the identity of someone who doesn't miss workouts. Every time you write one sentence, you embody the identity of someone who is a writer. And ultimately, the real goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner, right? The goal is not to do a silent meditation retreat. It's to become a meditator. And so really true behavior change is like identity change. And the way that I connect this back to habits, and this I think also is the ultimate reason that habits are really important. We talk about habits as being important because they can get you external results. They can help you lose weight or be more productive or make more money, reduce stress. And they can do all those things, and that's great. But the real reason that habits matter is they can reshape your sense of self. They can give you a new way to look at yourself. And so this is a concept that I call identity-based habits. And the way that I summarize it is that every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And so no, writing one sentence does not finish the novel, but it does cast a vote for I'm a writer. And no, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And the more that you cast those votes, the more you build up evidence of being that kind of person. And so your question about, well, what if I don't consider myself a writer? Or what if I don't think I'm athletic? Or what if, whatever. Start with the behavior, do something small, use the 2-minute rule, cast a single vote, and then use that as evidence of being that kind of person. And I think this is a little bit different than what you often hear, which is like fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it is asking you to believe something positive about yourself, but it's asking you to believe that without having evidence for it. And we have a word for beliefs that don't have evidence. We call it delusion, right? Like at some point, your brain doesn't like this mismatch between what you're saying and what you're actually doing. And so my argument, behavior and beliefs are like a two-way street. What you believe influences the way you act, and how you act influences what you believe. But my argument is to let the behavior lead the way. Start with one push-up, start with one sentence, start with one deep breath, whatever it is, and let that be a vote for being that kind of person in that moment. And eventually, if you cast enough votes, if you keep showing up with these small habits, then you start to actually believe it about yourself because you're like, I can't deny I've done a push-up for 400 days in a row now. I guess I am kind of an athlete, at least in that regard. And so those small habits end up accounting for a lot more in the long run because they're shaping your sense of self.
Man, what an answer. That was awesome. That was really, really great. One of the things I always say is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is creating that habit one day at a time and what you do. One of the guys I learned from, his name is Robin Sharma. Many of you have listened to Robin. He's an upcoming guest on the podcast show. And when James is talking about writing right now, one of the things I learned from Robin was that writing creates clarity, and clarity precedes genius. Realize that even writing in a journal, as James was talking about, doesn't have to be public. Writing in a journal where you just write down your thoughts is cathartic. When you write down your thoughts, you get it on paper. It's very cathartic. I learned that when I was in middle school from my father, who I would consider a very, very strong writer. But like anything, it takes practice. So if you're a kid right now, I think one of the best skills you can learn is writing. If you're an adult, one of the best ways to communicate is through writing. And even if it's just for yourself to get your thoughts out on paper, as James can attest, is very powerful. And I love the analogy of intensity versus consistency. Of, if an avid fitness enthusiast, you can, frequency, consistency, intensity are terms. But in terms of writing, I love that. I just got done writing my Get Your Mind Right book, my third book coming out, and intensity. You talk about when you're writing a book, it is intense on that. So, man, that is an awesome answer, James. You talked about sleep, writing, reading. Was there a fourth one you were going to say as far as one of James Clear's best habits?
Yeah, we've already talked about it a little bit, but it's some type of exercise or training. And I think, honestly, I don't think I would be an entrepreneur if I didn't have a consistent workout habit for the last, 10 years or so. Like, there just are too many days where you're like, that was a total waste. I didn't get anything done. And then I go to the gym and I come home at night and I think, at least I had a good workout.
Right.
And like that like saved the day, basically. In addition to, how everybody's had this experience, but how often do you wrestle with a problem for like 4 hours? Then you leave your office and like on the way to the gym, you figure it out, or like you're driving in your car. So, you just need to you need to let it go for a second, give your brain a different way to look at it. And, the gym is a place where I can go and it's just about me. It's just about like those 45 minutes or what hour or whatever it is. And I can just leave all the other stuff for an hour and then come back to it. And I think that it really helps a lot for managing a business, growing it, all that stuff. It's just been, it's been the thing that has helped keep me centered over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think right now is imperative that all of us are moving and training. And obviously, not many people can go to the gym right now, but you can still work out at home, as James was talking about earlier, with body weight, regardless of your age. You've got to be moving your body. Training is imperative right now. I've been saying that over and over. You got to get out. You got to breathe some fresh air. And if you have a spouse or a son or daughter or a friend that you can get out there with, yes, keep your physical distancing. But the training aspect is cathartic unto itself. And by the way, when we talk about habits and writing things down, I would encourage all of you listening in today to write down your habits. What are your new rules of the next few months? What time are you waking up? What time are you going to sleep? What is your nighttime routine? I shared this on a previous episode of your nighttime routine. It's not just going to bed at a certain time, but what time are you shutting off your electromagnetic devices? What time, are you taking your melatonin? What are you doing at night to get that sleep so then you can actually make sure you ramp up in the morning routine? One of the things I shared is not getting on my phone first thing before my workout's done. Otherwise, I get distracted. And that habit, all of a sudden, I'm going down a rabbit hole of checking my Instagram, Twitter, text, emails. Next thing you know, I'm so distracted and I can't put into myself. So folks, remember, you've got to make sure that you're training. Yes, writing and reading for James. You got to be sleeping. But write down your habits, share it with a loved one, and you're going to create some great habits. And by the way, add Atomic Habits to your routine for reading, because it's a great book. And right now, your habits are essential. And whether it be for personal or for professional, now is a time to actually go deep in your own personal growth. So, hey James, what's coming up next for you? Are you in an intense writing project, or what's next on James Clear future?
Yeah, I am trying to make the most of this time. It's a great time to write. Can't go anywhere. Might as well work on the next book. So, I like topics that are kind of evergreen and apply to everybody. Habits certainly fits that category. So I'm kind of looking at other things that can play a big role in our daily lives, and that blend well with habits. So I'm thinking a lot about topics like strategy, decision making, choices. Like one question you could have when you finish Atomic Habits is, okay, that's great. I know how to build better habits now. Which habit should I focus on? And so I'm writing more about that, about like how to choose the highest and best use for your time and attention. We could call that focus. We could call it attention. We could call it strategy, whatever. There are a bunch of different things, but the kind of one of the central ideas that I've been playing with recently is your effort sets your floor, your strategy sets your ceiling. And so if you don't work hard, it doesn't matter how good your strategy is, everything goes to zero. And so your effort sets your floor. However, how high you can climb, what your ceiling is, your upside, that's often determined by your strategy. You got to work hard if you want to capture it. You got to climb to the next step. But you can limit yourself. You can hamstring yourself by not having a good strategy. And so ideally, of course, we want both. We want both great habits and killer strategy. We want to, make productive behaviors each day and make great choices. So I'm kind of thinking about the connection between
that is awesome. That is an awesome quote right there. Well, I can't wait to read your next book as well. James, if someone's gotten into some bad habits over this time, they've just been feeling glum, down, anxiety, stress, depression. In your book, you talk about bright line rules and habits. Would you have any advice on how to break a bad habit and get into some of these good habits we're talking about, whether it be, social media, whether it be eating, not working out? Any suggestions for these people who might be struggling today as they listen in?
Yeah, two things. And one of them is something I've wanted to raise anyway, because I think it kind of encapsulates both the good habit and the bad habit strategies that I'd like to talk about. So the first thing is all those rules that I mentioned earlier: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. That's for building a good habit. If you want to break a bad habit, you just invert each of those, do the opposite. So rather than making your habits obvious, you want to make your bad habits invisible. Unsubscribe from emails. If you're trying to stick to a diet, don't follow food bloggers on Instagram. If you're trying to spend less money on electronics, don't read the latest tech review blogs. Stop triggering yourself by looking at the stuff that you're trying to avoid. So, that's the classic diet example of get the junk food out of the house, right? So make it invisible instead of make it obvious.
Yep.
Make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. So those other ones. So take, for example, make it easy is all about reducing steps between you and the good behavior. Make it difficult is all about increasing steps, putting more friction between you and the bad habit. So that's another good strategy. You just asked me about what habits I follow. Another one of the habits that I do, and ties directly to this question, is I leave my phone in another room until lunch each day. And so I've got a home office.
Love that.
Which means the phone is only 30 seconds away, down the stairs in another room. And if I have it next to me, if it's on my desk, I'm like everybody else. I'll check it every 3 seconds, right? But if it's in another room, I never go get it, even though it's only 30 seconds away. And so I'm like, well, did I want it or not? In the one sense, I wanted it bad enough to check it when it was next to me. But in the other sense, I never wanted it so bad that I would work 30 seconds and go get it. And so just adding a little bit of friction between you and your bad habits, you'd be surprised how often that can help and curtail things. Beer is another example. This wouldn't work, of course, if you're actually, an alcoholic or something. But so if I have a 6-pack of beer and I put it in the front of the fridge, like in the door or somewhere where I see it right when I open it up, I'll grab one and have it for dinner each night just because it's there. But if I tuck it back underneath in the bottom of the fridge, it's back in the corner, I can't see it when I open the door.
Too much work.
I'll forget it's there. It'll be there for 2 months. I won't even remember. I'll look down there I forgot we bought those. And so again, it's just what is the easy? What is the obvious option? What is frictionless? So you want to make those bad habits, add some steps between you and those actions.
Man.
So anyway, that gives you kind of a couple high-level strategies for breaking a bad habit. And there are obviously many more in the book. But the bigger point that I mentioned, I want to come to, that I think encapsulates both trying to build good habits and to break bad ones, is that ultimately what you're trying to do, you may hear me talking about some of these ideas. And you're like, that sounds like kind of a small change, like just leaving the phone in another room or something.
It's big.
That's not going to make me productive. But, and this is something I say at the end of the book, the holy grail of behavior change is not a single 1% improvement. It's 1,000 of them. You're trying to layer these strategies on top of each other. One good choice is not going to make or break you, and one bad choice usually doesn't make or break you. It's just the gradual accumulation of trying to optimize this. And in my language, what I like to refer to that as is you're building a system. And so the way that I phrase this, that your ultimate outcome here, whatever you're trying to do, break bad habits, build good ones, whatever, the truth is you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And so often we think it's the opposite. We think I just need to set a big goal for myself and then I'll achieve this. But the truth is, so like to describe this a little more clearly, your goal, that's like your desired outcome, right? Your system is the collection of daily habits that you're following. And if there is ever a gap between your system and your goal, if there's ever a gap between your desired outcome and your daily habits will always win. Almost by definition, your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results, right? And so if you want, it's like whatever results you have right now today, they're a natural byproduct of whatever system, whatever habits you've been following for, say, the last 6 months or so. And so if you want the outcomes to change, we also badly want different results, but it's like fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. And so I think in most areas of life, your outcomes are like a lagging measure of your habits. So like your physical fitness is a lagging measure of your eating and training habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your reading and learning habits. Your bank account is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Even your, like the clutter on your desk at work or in your garage or whatever is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. And so the thing that you're trying to do here is not to make one little change. You're trying to make a gradual accumulation of little changes to build a better system, to create a better collection of daily habits that naturally lead you toward that outcome that you want. So I think whether you're building good habits or breaking bad ones, trying to make a variety of small improvements so that you rise to the level of or so that you don't think you're rising to the level of your goals, you realize you're falling to the level of your systems.
That is powerful, powerful. Last couple quick questions. I'm a get your mind right guy. People that have listened before, I'm always like, get your mind right, get your mind right. If there are one or two habits that you would advise to make sure someone gets their mind right, what is it?
Well, I don't know if I would define this as a habit as much as like a realization, but I think it's crucial, which is once you realize, and I talk about this a little more in the book, but once you realize that you can assign different meanings to the same experience, and that you're not changing the underlying facts, you're just changing the meaning that you assign to the situation. Well, if you believe that that is possible, if you think that is true at all, then why not tell yourself the most empowering version of the facts possible? Why not tell yourself the version of the facts that benefits you the most? So, for example, a lot of people might say stuff like, I don't know, I have to wake up and then I have to take my kid to school and I have to finish this report for work and then I have to go do a workout or whatever. I have to. Or you could say, I get to wake up. I get to take my kids to school. Right. I get to finish the report. I get to do this workout. And the difference between I have to and I get to is only one word, but man, it changes it from a series of obligations to a series of opportunities. And again, you're not changing the underlying facts of the situation. The facts are the same. You still got to get up and you got to take your kid in, you got to finish your work and you got to do the workout. But the difference between how you feel about it, which version is more empowering, is significant. Yeah. And so I think if you're talking about getting your mind right, a lot of the time it's just about mindset reframes. It's about telling yourself a better story about the version of the facts. You don't deny the truth. Don't look at the world through rose-colored glasses. You can still look at it the way it actually is, but tell yourself the version that is most empowering to you.
Phew, love it. That's changing the language that you tell yourself too. When you change that language, I would say this is your thoughts become your words become your flesh become your actions become your character, and your character ultimately becomes your legacy. All from your thought. Well, yeah, when you're thinking, how do you think? You read more inspirational material that influences your thought. Your thought then is going to come out through your words. The words become that flesh all the way down to your character and legacy. So powerful stuff, James. Hey, I'm going to end with this question. We talk about legacy. We talk about impact. What's James Clear's legacy going to be all about? When you think about James Clear and impact, how are you impacting the universe? What's your legacy going to be all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I get why people ask it. I've certainly thought about it a lot. Now, my kind of thought is, you know what? Like, that's for other people to decide. And my job is just to try to do the best work I can each day. Like, rather than worrying about a legacy, because like that's it's sort of like asking, like, what is other people's opinion of you going to be? And it's like, you know what? Honestly, I'm not really responsible for their opinion. Like, if it's good, great for me. If it's bad, like that's their problem. And for the most part, I'm like focused on how can I do great work, and how can I share something useful. And so hopefully, if the body of work is the thing that determines the legacy, then hopefully it'll be about being valuable, being practical. I kind of like the phrase like true, useful, and clear. And everything that I write, I want it to be true, useful, and clear. Let's try to get it right. Let's try to make it as practical and as actionable as possible. And let's try to make it easy to understand. And so hopefully the things I write and the things I share will kind of hit those 3 marks, and then we'll see how far that takes us.
Well, you sure are doing that. And I want to thank you for all that you're doing for the universe to make it a better place. Not only with Atomic Habits, which obviously has impacted millions of people already, but even your weekly writing and all. If any of our listeners today wanted to learn more about you, they want to follow you, subscribe, can you share once again all of the different places that one could do that?
Sure. So we'll keep it simple. Is really, if you want more information on the book, how to apply it, flesh out some of the ideas we talked about today, you can just go to atomichabits.com, and you can find Atomic Habits on Amazon or anywhere else you want to buy it. And then if you want to find out more about me, I've got hundreds of articles on the site, interviews, books, other stuff. So all of that is at jamesclear.com. And aside from Atomic Habits, probably the thing that I'm known best for is my weekly newsletter. So if you feel like checking that out, feel free to go to jamesclear.com and sign up, and you'll get a short message from me each week.
Well, James, thank you so much for just dropping such amazing knowledge and wisdom today. I know we really benefited from it. So thanks for being here. Folks, you're going to want to follow him. Make sure you follow James Clear. Read his book. I know he's got some great things coming up as well. So James, once again, thanks so much.
Obviously, yeah. Thank you so much. It was great to chat, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You're awesome. Hey, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I've got some really big, exciting news coming out. As you know, I've got my new book, Get Your Mind Right, coming out on June 2nd. But I've got something even bigger before that. If you would like to be part of my brand new launch team, I have a launch team of any fire-breathing dragon, any mind right maniac who wants to spread the gospel of Get Your Mind Right. We've got some exciting news for you to be on the launch team. It's going to be launching the week of April 20th. So stay tuned. Now, here's what you get when you're on the launch team. You get a free physical copy of the Get Your Mind Right book, the first 200 people anyway. Everyone gets access to the digital version of Get Your Mind Right. You get access to the audio version of the book when that comes out. You're part of a private Facebook group that I'll be in, delivering some exclusive content and bonuses just for you. So stay tuned. The news is coming out the week of April 20th, and get ready for the Get Your Mind Right book launch team. Until then, remember to train hard, eat right, and live inspired. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Don't forget to get your mind right.